Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Okay, welcome everybody to Chassidus in the morning. 15 minutes to change your life. Vayoshet Melech Esther. Achana for Purim. Okay, so basically what we were talking about yesterday is asking two main questions. Is that why there's two stories in the Megillah about the scepter. The king puts out to Esther the first time. Well, really we quote the second time. And he puts it out. She holds onto the scepter and lifts her up. She's crying to the king that the people are getting destroyed. And basically Achashverosh says, do whatever you want with this. He gives her the special seal of the king, and he's like, do whatever you want with them. And and with that she makes she writes an edict onto the first decree, which was to destroy the Jewish people, that the Jewish people can fight back. And therefore very successful. But that's the second time. The first time, it's about she wants to make a meal with Achashverosh and Haman, and so he puts out the scepter. She touches him. So the Alter was asking what's the difference in the story? What happened this time when she touches, and this time she holds? And we said, and also what does this mean for us? So we went the whole discussion about what does it mean Esther? That Esther is really reference to the Jewish people in Galus. Like it said, like what do we know of Esther from the Torah? Is Haster will be concealed. That's this level of concealment. And we have different levels. There's levels of concealment, and this is sort of when the Nefesh Bahamis is covering over. We can't see things. And then we started talking about yesterday how that all the Moedim, all the festivals would be nullified when Mashiach comes, besides Purim. And it said a halacha. So we said, what's the special? So we started discussing what's the special about the Purim and halacha. So he's explaining first the Yom Tovim, the general Yom Tovim. And then when we understand how great they are, but what they miss, and that's why they're nullified, we'll understand how great Purim is. Yeah. So we'll start, so page 32 in the Sefer, if you have it. If not, just follow along. Passover passion, particularly during the holidays of Pesach, the radiance of supernal love, which emanates from divine loving kindness, chesed, shines within every soul. Consequently, every Jewish soul spark is elevated to a place of spiritual sensitivity. So on Pesach, we have a little bit, we receive a sensitivity. And that's why you could say why it's one of the most kept Yom Tovim, where it is aroused with tremendous love and passion for God, and the commitment to completely eradicate any obstacles that might compromise this love, i.e. worldly passions, that by their very definition oppose and contradict the love of God. So we have worldly passions which contradict our love for God. We can't have love for 7-layer cake and love for God. They contradict each other. They could have it at different times, but really they contradict each other. It's like you can't have a love for junk food and also have a love for running and doing exercise. They sort of counteract each other. It doesn't work because they go in different directions. And so too with us, we have to recognize where are our passions, where are our loves, where are the things that we're holding, and are they in line with our godliness, or are they taking us away from that? If we have a love for speaking Lashon Hara, then it's going to take away that love for being nice to people and not saying Lashon Hara. And we have to find out in our lives, there's plenty of things, unfortunately, that our Nefesh Bahamis, the Yetzer Hara, is in control and giving us that love and will push us in that direction. So let's say on Pesach comes, he's saying that there's an added love from godliness that's revealed, so that love for those things are less, and we'll actually work on ourselves more easily to have the love and passion for God. Yeah. At the very definition of the love of God, the process of breaking one's worldly desires is called l'achfayas l'sitra acha, to subjugate the sitra acha, forcing those negative desires to be under the guide of one's spiritual drive. So a simple way of doing this is ask yourself, are you happy with where you're holding in life? And if you're not, ask yourself what's bothering me? What is it that's not good? And what do I need to be changing? And why do I have that desire? Why do I have that issue? Where's it coming from? And really talk to yourself, sit down and have that conversation, and you'll come down to realize that thing that is opposing. And then when you push that down and you say, you know what? I realize that what's ruining me is my negative thoughts on myself. So I've got to work on that. So when you start to say, I'm not going to speak not nice to myself, that is what we're talking about. So destroying the opposition. The idea of that worldly passions prevent godly love, and as such must be destroyed, is demonstrated in the verse. So we see this in the passuk, who struck Egypt through its firstborn. For his kindness, chazda, is everlasting, lo'elam. So i.e., in order for the eradication of supernal love, chesed, to illuminate, in order of the radiance of supernal love to illuminate the world, olam, he smote the firstborn of Egypt. There's elements that contradict godly love. That the firstborns of Egypt are synonymous with Klippa. And so, like we say in davening on Shabbos, who struck Egypt through its firstborns. So we struck them down, or Hashem struck them down. And then the chazdoi, the chesed, was able to come out. What we're saying here, recognize what's not going well, push it down, not do it, push it away, and that will let the kindness in, the loving kindness, the connection to God. In a similar vein, on every Shabbos and festival, there is a manifestation of divine radiance that causes the Jewish people to rise from the grip of materiality and ascend to spiritual heights. So on Shabbos, we have this sort of separation that we get from physicality and more spiritual. And we see clearly on Shabbos, we're much more connected, and we don't have our phones and things like this, and it just makes it much easier. And I can trust you myself that Shabbos is such a different experience. That's what he's saying that happens, because that's what it does. Perek Daled, page 34, an uplifting allegory. So we find this ascent for the Jewish people on Shabbos and festivals alluded to in another verse, and we're going to bring a passuk from Shir Hashirim, and we're going to discuss it in the spiritual terms. Very interesting. It is written, and this is the passuk: who is this that rises from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with every powder of the merchants? So this is from Shir. Rashi says this passuk is speaking about the nation's reaction to the Yidden's traverse through the desert. They exclaim, how great is the spectacle for this nation that is ascending from the wilderness, who journey with a pillar of fire and a cloud of clearing, and a cloud clearing the way for them, and a cloud of incense emanating from the altar. That's what Rashi explains in the passuk. So basically talking about the Jewish people in the desert going through, and how they have these clouds of smoke and fire that's protecting them, and the base of Mikdash, or the Mishkan, and things like that. So remember, with the passuk once again, who is this that arises from the wilderness, meaning the Jewish people, like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, and has a smell with every powder of the merchants. So allegorically, we can expand the verse as follows: the parting distillation. Who is this? This meaning Zeus, that rises from the wilderness, Midbar. So Zeus refers to the Jewish people, like we said before, who rises from the wilderness of physicality on Shabbos Yom Tov. That who rises from the wilderness, meaning the wilderness of the mundane, and we're going to Shabbos and Yom Tov. Wilderness connotes these material elements that are antithetical to godliness, elements that are virtually and spiritually wastelands. Wilderness or midbar is also etymologically related to the word dibur, not just the physical place, but also midbar, dibur, speech, meaning speech in this context referring to the idle chatter. On Shabbos and festival, the soul rises from this wasteland, the wasteland of physicality, not just physicality in a positive, not physicality in a positive way, physicality in a negative way. Eating, drinking, talking, and doing things that are antithetical to our purpose, our mission, our godly mission. Or speaking not nicely about ourselves, about other people, divine battalion, just speaking nonsense and having conversations that aren't actually valuable in any way. These types of things. So that's the midbar. And Zeus, who is Zeus? Who is this? Meaning the Jewish people, they rise on Shabbos Yom Tov from this desert. Smoke and fire, like columns of smoke. This isn't possible, like columns of smoke. When the spiritual transformation occurs, it is like columns of smoke. What's smoke? Smoke is produced when fire consumes a conflicting element. For example, when one burns wood or a wick, it is the flame's consumption of the moisture found within the wood and the wick that causes the smoke. That's why when you ever go in camp and you go and you can make a bonfire, you have to find dry wood. One of the reasons is not just that it's hard to burn, but when it burns, if it's wet, it's very smoky and it's very intense. So too here, yeah, when the columns of smoke, what's the smoke they're talking about? They're saying it's when it's burning up this moisture. That's the more moisture contained in any given object, the more smoke that will result when it is burned. Similarly, on Shabbos and festivals, when the divine radiance is manifest, it burns and consumes, so to speak, those elements that oppose godliness. The achfaya, the sitra achra. It's hard to read the Hebrew in English words. Thereby producing spiritual smoke. So the smoke and dependent on how much we're consuming of the physicality, the negative physicality, is how much smoke there is. So God is in the details. So that's what happened in Shabbos Yom Tov. Perfume, what does perfume mean? It is called thin smoke, like the smoke of incense, because it is a fine nature. The Torah refers to incense not as smoke, but as a cloud. Smoke, think about a cloud, is nice, beautiful, it's a little wet. Smoke is chokes. So the cloud of the incense shall blanket. The reason why burning incense produces relatively thin smoke is because the fire does not need to consume an element that is diametrically opposed to itself. Meaning the fire, when it's consuming the water is diametrically opposed. That's why it has this whole smoke. Whereas here, when it's burning incense, there's not that watery stuff that diametrically opposed in spiritual terms. So it's not a big smoky thing. Within the incense are elements that are only somewhat resistant to the flame. Nevertheless, there must be at this point the idea of perfume to burn and consume even the most subtle of negative traits from within every individual in accordance with one's personal level and the value of his soul as he progresses spiritually. So therefore, even when we talk about the perfume, the smoke, there's the smoke and then there's the perfume, which is the incense, frankincense, which is brought up on the Mizbeach, that is burnt up, but it's a lot more refined. But it's still, he's saying, once you get rid of the big issues, you're not sleeping, going to bed on time, you're speaking to yourself not nicely, you're being rough, you're not eating healthy, you're not learning every day, you're not davening. So once you can take care of those big things, then you can start to recognize the deeper things that need to be worked on, the more refined issues. What's with myrrh? This is similar to the verse in the Megillah. Now, when each maiden's turn came to go to the king Achashverosh after 6 months of oil with myrrh, so this is in the passuk. So for 6 months, they put on this myrrh, this oil. Every Jewish soul spark is as a maiden before God. So we all have this maiden aspect within us, which is like the story in the Megillah that they're all getting dressed to go meet in front of Achashverosh. Before God, which yearns to come to the king, just like they all wanted to come be the queen. So too, we all have this concept. We want of our soul coming close to the divine, to come to the king, to ascend and perceive the divine radiance. Each soul on its particular level. 6 months with the oil myrrh. Oil represents chachma, wisdom, and myrrh is etymologically related to the word merirus, bitterness. Thus, the Megillah is saying that after one has climbed out of his spiritual wasteland and has crushed and separated the negative elements, thereby enabling them to be consumed and burned as smoke and incense, one can then truly understand and appreciate how bitter these elements truly are. So once you go up, and we'll stop here, frankincense. Yeah, there's 2 more to go. But basically what we're saying is, so we'll go back over the passuk, and we'll discuss it in terms of the deeper way of understanding it. So the passuk says, who is this that arises from the wilderness like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, which with every powder of the merchants? So we're saying, who is this that rises up from the wilderness? Meaning the Jewish people, that even though they're in the wilderness of the mundane of during the week, they rise up on Shabbos Yom Tov like columns of smoke. And the smoke, what's smoke? Is the fire consuming the things that are opposed to it. The godly soul, the godliness is consuming, pushing down the negative forces and making those good choices that we should be making. And the perfumed, which is with the myrrh, frankincense, perfumed is like, and we're saying that the frankincense really is the burning up on much more refined levels, and not just we get rid of the main issues that we have to deal with. It's like if let's say another example is like shidduchim. It's not working out. We can ask ourselves, let's have honest conversation with ourselves on what's going on, and what's happening, and what is something that's not working, and we have to figure out. We have to ask a lot of questions. A lot of time when you go to a therapist or something, or people, life coach, a lot of time what they'll do is just ask you questions, and when you have to, so the trick is, you don't need to go to someone else and pay them a lot of money to ask yourself questions. We got to learn how to ask ourselves the questions, and sometimes we do. We need help, but a lot of it is about asking ourselves the right questions. And we have to realize, where do we have, like, I have to realize, are we in the desert during the week, or we're not in the desert? Are we doing the right thing or not? And what is it that is not going well? In the shidduchim, what is it that's not going well? Is it something with me? Am I making wrong choices, or am I looking for something that I shouldn't be looking for? And I've had people over the course of time, people telling me things that it's shocking. So, and so they're in the desert, but not necessarily they recognize it. And that's sort of what we're saying. So you have this desert. So here we're talking about Shabbos Yom Tov. So the Jewish people rising up in the wilderness like Shabbos Yom Tov, and they're pushing away the negative forces, like columns of smoke. They're burning up these negative forces, and not just the big issues, but even the small ones, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense. Myrrh, we said, is this oil of chachma that they put on this oil for 6 months. The maidens wanted to come in front of Achashverosh, which is saying really it's us wanting to come close to God. That with the oil that we're talking about in this myrrh is like chachma, is the wisdom to recognize that there's issues in my life, and my life is not going the way it should be, and I don't want to be in this situation. I want it to change. I don't figure what to do. And once you do that, you'll have a bitterness, meaning recognize that I've been doing things that are going against that goal of mine. We want to be whatever it is, but we have things that are stopping us from we're making choices that are stopping us from being able to be there. So I don't want to take too long. To be continued tomorrow.